All right. Welcome, everyone, to the Historic Area Commission meeting. It is Thursday, April 10th, 2025. I'd like to start having everyone state their name, starting with you, Kevin.
Kevin Wade.
Cynthia Batty.
Lisa Doak. Tara Hayward Olivas.
Layla Hammer, architect.
We have a quorum. Let's start with reviewing the minutes from the March 13th meeting.
You know, we could do that under new business and do the applications first, and then these nice people can go home and
That's
have a nice
fine.
evening if that's okay with everybody.
That's fine. I thought we could do this now. There was just something I wanted to mention
Oh, okay.
after. So
Sorry, I mean, I didn't see anything in the.
that's
minutes.
okay. I didn't see anything either, so.
If you want to do it, it's fine. I just didn't want to have an extended discussion while.
No, that's fine. I don't think
humans
there's
have to put in.
any extended discussion. If everything looks good, there are no corrections. Someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the minutes of the March 13th, 2025 meeting.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. So before we get started, I wanted to just make a general comment. Some of you may have attended or seen, there was a candidate forum for the local election that's upcoming for city council. And a question that was submitted to the applicants, and this is in no way an endorsement for that particular candidate. I just want to address something that was stated. Is there was a question as to how we plan to address overregulation in the historic residential district by HAC, or how the candidates would. And one of several candidates responded that there was a need for consistency. No one seemed to think that there was overregulation. And I think it's important that people understand why the Historic Area Commission exists and what it is that we do. We exist because the historic districts are established by zoning. So because of that, the city has to have a historic architectural review board, which is the Historic Area Commission. There has been a board like this since 1951, because the city decided that there was a need for, as it says in the guidelines, for responsible stewardship. So all work performed in the historic residential district, historic commercial district, on properties that are listed on the National Register, that all comes before the Historic Area Commission. The guidelines and standards, so we were established by council. The guidelines and standards that we use were approved by council. This isn't a subjective process. We have very clear guidelines and standards that we use to evaluate every single application that comes before us. And I just wanted to give, a general statement, because I think it's important that people understand that we're just not a group of fussy individuals that want to make your life difficult.
Some of that's ancient history though too, because it hasn't always been the fair kind of approach that we try to take.
Right, but I think I say this because I think it's important that people recognize that regardless of that's not in our control, how things might have been in the past. We follow the guidance that we have now, and we do it to the best of our ability. We're guided by a subject matter expert. It's an open process. If someone doesn't agree with our determination, there's an appeals process.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to give a little bit of context and just kind of respond to that. We also, as far as consistency is concerned, we have no ability to enforce. That's something that's brought up often. Well, so-and-so did this, why can't I do it? Well, that person might have done something and they may not have had the necessary permission to make whatever change they did. So someone in the city has the ability to correct that, to enforce the code, but it is not us. So I would also just say if anyone has a concern with anything, to contact the city administrator, the code enforcer, the building official. It's just important that those things are documented and that's the proper channel to do that.
Can I add something to that?
Yeah.
For the folks who are here too, so that you understand. When you look at the total code book, the laws for the city, about a third of them pertain to the preservation of the historic area. I think people don't realize how much of our laws are focused on historic preservation. And the design standards that contain a little bit more detail about how to apply knowledgeable information about historic periods and so forth is incorporated by reference into the code, so it has the force of law. So it's easy to sort of poo-poo it, but it is actually the law. So and I hope those of you who've sat through meetings where I've been here can appreciate that I'm always looking for a way to get something done, not to not do stuff. So but it's our responsibility to preserve this incredibly important historic area, and we are required to do it by law as well. So sounds harsh, but that's the way it is. And I'm very, very familiar with the code, and I think this whole team is. But I just wanted to make it clear, and I'm more familiar with the code than I am the design standards, I just would say. So I'm glad you brought that up. Okay.
Well, with that, let's move on to our first application, which is 204 Delaware Street. Denali Beauty Works, Amanda Reeder. Is there someone here representing this application? Hi, if you'd like, you're welcome to sit there, or if you'd like to come up and sit at the table here, wherever you're more comfortable, if you want to move closer, but otherwise we can.
I can see everyone.
Okay, perfect. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your application?
I was told to fill out an application. Well, I filled out an application. When I first rented the space, I was given information that may or may not be true. So my sign was, I did my sign and I hung it and then found out that I needed to do an application. The information I was given was that because it was inside and not light up and not neon, that it didn't need approval. But once I found out that it did, I did the application, provided as much detail as I could. I also can't find in the code where it does say anything about the inside of the building. All the design stuff I can find says everything about the outside.
So the design guidelines and standards, which were approved by council, so that, let me pull those up. So, and I know that is something that confuses a lot of people because we do focus primarily on the exterior of the building, but anything that affects, because the streetscape is, it is a contributing feature of the historic district at the local level, and also the significance of the designation as a National Historic Landmark District. Anything that affects the exterior of the property, like in a window from the public right of way, that's where it does fall into the purview of the Historic Area Commission. And that,
Would that also include like window displays and stuff too?
I
No,
think,
window displays are are considered temporary, you know, set outs. Now, if your window display included that you would want to put a decal on the window as part of it, no, that's affecting the actual physical structure of the envelope. But if you're putting things inside, no, that's considered furnishing.
Okay.
Leila, would you talk about your view of this? Cause, I'm trying to understand myself.
Well, I think, there are three aspects when you look at the signage. One is the shape and whether it's suitable, two is the material, and three is where it's located and how it's more consistent with would have typically been done in a historic context like this and other areas. So for example, your signage, the shape, the round shape is fine. The graphics of, you know, your business and that graphic design is fine. But a typical sign in the historic district would be a wood sign, which you have with painted lettering on top, which you do not. You have a vinyl applique, if I remember correctly from your submission. And it's also hanging with two metal components that you can see from the inside. Typically, a sign like that would be affixed, and I do believe they're the remnants next to you of exterior perpendicular iron where you could hang a signage. So your sign the modification would need to be done is one, the preferred location is on the outside of the building, similar to what you've seen on the street. You would hang it off one of the elements, and actually we can go and look at it together. I believe the one that you have that's still there.
It's in the picture,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah, well, it's in the picture, and I think it's still in good condition, and there's one on either side. And what you would do with the sign is you would just have to remove the vinyl and have the design that you've chosen painted on and lettering onto it, so that it would meet the guidelines.
So the sign cannot be inside?
No,
I
typically,
have to move it outside?
that would be the preferred, yes, that would be the preferred thing. And because inside, it's meant to be a signage that's perceived from the streetscape, that's why you have it in such close proximity. Clearly, if we're a neon sign, that would be a clear no, but signage and that's where we have, you know, the guideline about that's in the streetscape, because that's kind of what applies with it. It would not have been consistent to have something hanging inside of the glazing storefront, because the idea is that you want to be seen as you're coming down or as you're walking up the street. Or you would have a sign that would have been on the elevation, like the sign that was just approved last time to be put again on the restaurant that's further up Delaware Street. So I guess to summarize, and I know this is, because you did not know, this is not so much an application for new work, it's to regularize a situation that's already been done. In order for me to recommend that it be approved, I would say relocate the sign to the outside using existing elements that are already there, and revise the signage to not have a vinyl applique on it, but to have it a painted wood sign. And there are a number of them that you can see along the street, particularly on Delaware Street. And I think the size would be fine. And the hangers would be typically, you'd go more with something that's black iron, black metal, or black chain, something that would sort of fit with the hanging elements that you already have there that could be used.
Is the round frame of this okay with you?
Yes, because I think the shape itself, as long as there's the material,
Mm-hmm.
there was a thing where people often think about standards of rectangular or things, but there are also some places that used to be, if it was a tavern, you would have had somebody taking the lid of a barrel and putting it up.
Right.
So the shape in of itself and the size is actually, you know, appropriate.
Size is good.
yeah, I
Yeah,
I
so
don't think there's any problems with the shape or the size. I think really the only changes that should be made to bring it to conformance are, you know, instead of the vinyl application or applique should be painted, and then definitely hung. I think there is there's a metal
there are two hangers on either
hanger just
side.
right right above the window there. Are there any thoughts, comments from?
We've talked a lot about sandwich board signs, and there's a sandwich board in the window here, which meets the criteria that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And I deeply appreciate that it's inside the window. Thank you. I think that's okay.
Yes, I
Okay.
mean, yes, and that's, you know,
Right.
the larger concerns are with sandwich boards that are on the exterior that are sort of really intruding on the streetscape.
Yeah,
There's I mean, and some of the things on the interior, particularly when you're talking about if I have a display, you can have a display where certain people might like it, certain people not, but it is the purpose of a business to have different types of display.
Yeah.
I will say there's also one suggestion, because if when you make the wood sign and you're gonna have the sign painted to represent, you know, you may not want to do something as intricate as what you have on the current sign, just because those are easier to produce in vinyl than to replicate in paint. I would say that you could also come with something simpler, and perhaps if you want to keep that sign that you have, but like put it on a stand and it would be like behind your window, sort of a bit recessed, like something people could come and could see it. That could also be a use, so you don't have to think that, oh, do I have to redo everything and toss the vinyl that I got? I think you could put on a thinner substrate, but you know, imagine this is almost like a large dinner plate that you could put at the corner when people come, and it's slightly recessed and it's there so people can see it. It's more ornate. And you could put a simpler sign in terms of the graphics for the wood painting on the primary sign that'll be hanging off the street. That's completely up to you. I just know that sometimes painting can get a bit more complicated to replicate, and you have a lot of sort of delicate elements in the design that you've put there, so
Yeah,
that might
that's
be.
my logo.
Yeah, exactly. So you might want to do something like that, a more streamlined version. That doesn't mean that you have to toss and, you know, because you did put time and effort and money into that vinyl. So I think that would be a way sort of to then kind of have, you'd have the from far, and then you'd have the street level at the corner, sort of reiterating your identity behind their storefront.
So so I understand clearly, you're saying that technically I could still use the current sign I have if I took it down and it wasn't
No.
hanging?
It cannot, if it were not hanging and if it's displayed sort of in the corner behind, you know, behind the glazing. You know, it's on a stand, it's like somebody were to put a plate or a dish, or if you had a painting, yes, you could do that. And then, except it's not a hanging sign in the middle of the storefront where people are sort of seeing it. It's more like an object that's recessed and it's in a corner and that looks like a piece of furnishing. Yes, that could be, in my opinion, I mean, the commission would have to opine on that. That would be acceptable. At that point, it's not a signage, it's more a decorative element that's in the back that says who you are. But anything that's affixed onto the elevation that impacts what people are seeing from the outside and from the street, and in this case, it's very much centered and close on your bay window, that would definitely have to be removed.
you don't have any problem with the logo itself if that were painted on on a circle and on the outside?
No, and I think, you know, except in other clear sort of cases, I don't think we necessarily go and determine all of the sort of the fonts and things like
Yeah.
that. Some historic districts do.
Some do.
Some historic districts do. That was not something that the historic area update, you know, advisory group wanted to put. Places like Cape May, they'll literally say you cannot use this font, you must use that font. So I think that's why this is effective as a black on white. In wood, I don't know if would be as easily reproducible. But from my perspective, no,
You
I
can
don't
paint
think, I
anything.
think it's, you know, with the flowers, it's not something that I would have an issue with.
Okay,
No, I think it's mostly the materials and just the
location.
location that we're concerned with. There's nothing about the design or the font or any of those elements that are a concern to me or.
I want to push one more time. If she had it hand painted but left it where it's located now, are you okay with that?
No, because where it's located now, it's actually very close in the glazing. It impacts the view of the storefront as it is. And because it would read, I am a sign like that is something that should be on the streetscape. It affects the perception from the streetscape of the elevation.
Okay.
And that is in the guidelines and
Yeah.
standards. Signage for street level businesses should be located below the second floor window sills.
I have a couple questions. How much did the sign cost?
I spent probably almost $50 in material
How long has it been on display there?
for a month, over a month.
I just need
Before I
to iterate that we cannot take cost.
No, I'm not,
Into
I'm not
consideration.
asking the commission to take it into account. I'm taking it into account as a business owner myself. How much time can we give the shopkeeper to make the change?
I mean, now that the application has been submitted, we can write a review saying, you know, it would have to be modified X, Y, Z. And that means you could come and we could have a consultation. So I think that is something, I do think that since the application is here and a decision is made, the revision should be implemented. It's not something that should wait, like, let the sign be there for 6 months and then change it. I think this is
No, we're
something should go
grateful,
sooner rather
we're
than later.
grateful that she's put the application in,
Of course.
but can we show some consideration to just give her a few months? I mean, the
There-
town's been here for 300 years. I don't think the sign is going to disrupt. I
There's
mean, we
no,
agree on the standards. Just a matter of reasonable timing.
what I mean is I'm not saying like yay or nay, I'm just saying there is no mechanisms within the guidelines by which one can say you have to come into compliance. Now, there normally would be, because normally compliance, that's a building code official. That's when, you know, Jeff said, hey, and he made us all aware of it last month. We knew it was coming. He mentioned that. And by the way, congratulations on opening the business. But there is no mechanism by which we can tell people, hey, you know, remediation can come in 6 months. That's not the purview of HAC. It's more once an application, it's a question of enforcement, making sure that it's done in a timely manner. I'm not avoiding the question. I'm saying just in terms of where our purview comes, this would need to be done. Obviously, you need to take the time to have the sign fabricated, which, you know, should not be long. And I know people can easily recommend because we had a number of signs that were recently done in the city. So it's not like take down the sign. I also think it's not inappropriate to say, as long as we know that a new sign is being made, I don't necessarily want to say remove the sign. If somebody questioned that it's in process, you are making the new sign and this will be removed. So I think that is not an issue.
Okay. My question is, there are a number of businesses, and I know, but, you know, other things haven't been enforced and everything. But there are multiple businesses that have the same exact signs on the inside and outside. But I'm being told to not have one on the inside.
It's just, they are, the rules that, well, not, other than the fact that people say each application is on its own, there are two aspects. The things that come to us that are reviewed, that are approved, that are implemented, that's one thing. There are things that are done either without prior approval or let me do it, ask for forgiveness later. One thing that HAC does not do is enforcement. HAC reviews, HAC approve, and when I say HAC, I give the opinion. It is the HAC members who vote in that sense. But the fact that there's different enforcement for different circumstances is unfortunate, but it is something that's trying to be, you know, remedied in terms of at least having the consistency of the parameters and how they're applied and the standards. Beyond that, it's a matter of enforcement. And enforcement, as Tara mentioned earlier, that is the purview of the city, the building code official, the code enforcement official. And so I cannot speak to that.
Some of the ones that are out of compliance have been notified that they're out of compliance. The city would tell you they haven't had a code enforcement officer for a year. But that's part of the reason why I decided to run for city council on the platform of code enforcement, because of exactly what you've said. It doesn't seem fair, it's not right, and it degrades the historic district. So, you know, we need to enforce that and do things differently now.
And another question is, now I'm forgetting the word that you said, where it's hanging, you
Mhm.
called it a specific space.
No, you
A
have,
glazing, a glazing, or is that like the window
She means the
frame?
glass.
yes,
That
okay,
means
so,
the
yes,
glass.
but when you look, you have your window frame, right?
Yeah.
And pretty much it's a bay it's a flat sort of bay window, and when you see it, you're actually very much with your location that's hanging, I believe pretty much off the inner frame, right into the window opening.
Yes.
It becomes very much a part of the assembly.
Okay.
So you're very close. And when you go into the code, there's also other definitions about how, how far away from a window, not the signage, right? And I'm not encouraging you to say, I'm gonna put the sign 2 feet back. But that's why elements like this become part of the whole window opening, and openings and windows and framing and glazing are things that are under the purview of HAC, because the primary purview saying, I didn't find any standards on the interior. That's because the purview of HAC and these guidelines were purposely set to only apply to areas that are visible from the public right of way. So if you wanted to put, the pink chewing gum with gray polka dots and purple flowers popping up on the inside, right? I'm not saying on the window, but inside, we could not say anything. Or you wanted a super modern staircase instead of a traditional one. That's a different proposition.
But you're saying even if I took that and I put it on an easel off the window, but still visible from the window, that's okay?
Yes, because my interpretation of that, and again,
Yeah.
my interpretation of that is sort of like, your sandwich board. It's sort of, it's kind of a piece of furniture that you're removing it back from the window. It can look aesthetically pleasing and it's echoing, could be painting or something like that. That becomes, for me, that is not signage. That is something that you're putting in, it's your logo, and you're putting it as a piece of furnishing in the back. Now, if you said that you happen to have an easel that just happens to be way up here and is within 2 inches of the glazing, we'd be having another conversation. But yes,
Yeah.
to that point, yes, if you wanted just to take it, and as I said, this is my professional opinion. If it's on an easel, it's further back like a painting, and it's sort of at that height that people can see it, I would say, okay, that is not signage in the sense it's something permanent that's hanging. It's something that's movable, it's something that's removable, it's something that's further back, and it's not attached to the physicality of the exterior.
So if she decided to do that and not put a sign anywhere, are you okay with that?
Well, the
I
question
mean-
is, are we okay with that?
I think,
I mean, and again, I would just say my opinions, and in that case, yes, because it's, imagine if there was a chair that was set further back and it happened to have on the back of the chair her logo and the logo was looking, I would be comfortable with that. As long as we have this size and the scale and it was put at a sort of, at a discrete distance, yes.
is this something, Layla, where you could go and do a consultation on site?
Yes.
To make sure, so then it's very clear what,
And I'd be,
what you're saying.
yes, I'd
and,
be happy to come and we can mock it up and look at some
Mhm.
locations, and then I'd take a picture from the inside, take a picture from the outside, and I turn it around with the documentation I do with all applications and saying, okay, instead of doing this, there is no signage. This is the furnishing that's being put on the interior.
It would be a good case study because other people will ask these questions, and we haven't talked about case studies. So if, for your information, we have a document that's almost ready to go now to explain the rules around signage, which has taken a long time to write because it's complicated, as you obviously can see. But I think a case study around some of these things would be helpful for the future as well.
And I
Let me ask something if I could. If she put this on an easel 3 foot inside from the glass, we have no purview over it. I mean, I'm just, right.
Yeah.
Now, I believe it's a sense, I can't speak for the rest, it's a sense of the commission. Your business sign would look better in wood out in front. I think we all I think we all agree to that.
Yeah.
But if you put your sign on an easel 3 foot back, you could take 6 months or a year to
Mhm.
do something nicer in terms of what the commission would like.
Well, that was my question, is would that do? I think the answer is yes.
We're just trying to accommodate some reasonable actions to, allow you to do your business.
And because we need to be very clear, because like when we talk about signage, we also say aluminum and PVC is not,
Not okay.
is not appropriate.
Yeah.
But that's why I think when you get to that depth and distance, you become more of a piece of furnishing, which is why I brought up the first time, saying if you don't want to waste the fact that you have this nice logo that you've done, you could use it from that perspective. So for me, that would be an acceptable solution. At that point, we're not talking about exterior signage.
So from a non-architectural point of view, this sounds like it might not make sense, is you're gonna have the same sign, you're gonna put it in easel just a few feet back from your window, it doesn't make sense. So the reason why we do this, the reason why it's in code is there's a separate section of the code that talks about storefronts and preserving historic storefronts. And it's more about preserving the historic vista of the architecture of that storefront window. And when there is a modern sign that's sitting right smack in front of the window, it doesn't preserve the vista of the architectural beauty of a storefront building. So when you take it down from the chain and you put it on an easel, it just looks like a decoration in the window in your storefront. And we'd be fine with that. As a business owner, I would prefer to have what back in the day they used to call put out a shingle. That's where the saying comes from, is you literally like put out a shingle and paint, you know, I cut hair, you might have scissors on there or whatever. And that's all, you know, people who couldn't read would come down the street and know this is where I go to get my hair cut. And so that's what we're trying to replicate by having it vertically in front of your store window, so people walking down the street can see, hey, if I want to stop in and get my hair cut, or, you know, whatever service I want, this is where I come. So this is where the nuances come that seem like we're being inconsistent, but this is where the background of that comes from.
Thank you very much.
And I also, you know, the reason I bring up you meeting on site, because I understand that coming here and not, you know, knowing the guidelines like we do or their application, that it can seem really intimidating, but we, you know, it's why we have a subject matter expert here who's available to meet you at your business and to talk you through it. And so then there's no question of, okay, well, you know, you put it up, it's like, is this what they want? Am I doing it correctly? You know, we don't want anyone to feel that way. And anytime you have a question, you know, as commissioners, we should not be talking to applicants directly, but that's why you can call the city office. You can communicate with Layla.
I have a
that
business
way.
card. I'll give you my card if you want to just reach out with a phone call or an email.
Miss, does any of this make sense to you?
Some of
Are
it
you
does.
understanding what we're getting to?
It seems like if I make the changes that are requested, a lot of it sounds like make this change and then you do that. And like, oh no, that's still not okay. You kind of have to do something different. And then you do that change and it just somewhat feels kind of back and forth.
We don't want it to be back and forth.
No.
Yeah, it's pretty much, if you want a sign that's close to the window, that's visible from the street, and that's prominent, the way you have it, then the right sign is to be on the exterior, on the wall, on the hanging component perpendicular, so people can actually see it when they're coming up or down the street from across the street and see it. So if you want that kind of sign and that visibility from the street, that is the preferred sign. It's either that or some people will put a wood sign on the, you know, on the facade, a long wood sign going along. And, you know, you also have some limitation because you're occupying the space, but you don't. So that's one thing. If you now say, you know, you just want to have a component of your identity, which is the logo and this piece that you have, but you're going to just exhibit it a little, you know, further back 3 feet, then that's fine. It's a furnishing. So that's the two clarities. The sign, which is a signage for public, because you want visibility from the street the way you have it, is not appropriate. So if you want to go down that route, exterior sign on the wall, hanging it, proper materials.
It may not be what you have now, but it's a consideration. You get value for the money you've spent already by putting it inside on an easel. And then you have time to work out details of a wooden sign if you care to put one outside.
And part of the problem is the way that it is hung as well, the metal chain.
It's a combination. It's the way, it's primarily where it's hung, its proximity, and to the point that Lisa made, its impact on the perception of an important architectural feature and how it changes. Then the second component is anything so that's a primary. The secondary is if you're a signage and you're an approved signage, you have to be wood. You cannot be PVC, you cannot be vinyl. You have to be wood and painted wood. Some signs can be actually metal if it's like a wrought iron sign or something like that, but they have to be painted. So that's the second component. We're talking about the easel, that's because I brought up originally saying if you didn't want to lose the investment that you did in this, then you could still have that as a secondary point that you would put on the interior. And it's also a good way to have an interim period where you're compliant with the regulations by removing it and putting it there, but still keeping an identity pointer for your business.
Would there be a way of it being approved, painted, not vinyl, still hung, but hung differently back further away from the window? It's still visible,
It's a foul that's
like an easel, but hung.
no, I mean, we're starting to cross into like a more of a gray area. I don't think you want something hanging 3 feet back from the window where patrons are gonna come in and risk bonking their heads on it. And if you're still trying to be a signage visible, and it's like, like if it says I'm a signage, if it acts like a signage, if it wants to be a signage, then it's a signage. So it has to meet the standards. I think, and I'm just being candid and very, very direct. That's the clarity. And then the further back you put it, the less visibility you get, because people are not gonna notice it unless they're smack in front of it. There won't be any angle views or anything like that. And because you're, practically your logo is a delicate one, so, but it'll be a signage of everything but the intent. So no, that would have to be something that would say you still have to remove it and put it on the exterior.
So I'm gonna ask one more question on your behalf, stuff you may not have even thought about. We have allowed some signage painted directly on the window. In the material that I've been working on and we've all been working on, stuff on the window tends to have a sort of old-fashioned look to it. Would it be okay if she had this, for example, gilded on her window?
Yes, I mean, those are also obviously options.
Yeah,
You could have it gilded on the window, you could have paint, you cannot have a
vinyl.
vinyl,
Yeah.
what's the word? I had too many, not a wrap.
Applique.
Well, there you go. I've been using the term applique and I lost it again. So no, you cannot have a vinyl applique, but you could paint your glass if you wanted. You'd have somebody
Yeah.
come and either etch it or paint it. That would be acceptable.
And that size.
That design, that's what I was trying to get them to.
We might
Exactly,
come,
that just right on the window.
yeah, we might have to have some consideration about whether it could be fully, it should not, if it has to be painted on it, it can't be like on the white background where it would
Yeah.
stick like a sticker. So it'd have to be just the text and the flowers.
And
that are
and
painted.
not huge either, so within
Yeah.
the same size range as
And-
this.
And if you get proposals for that, I'm happy to meet with you and say, okay, let's talk proportions. Let's make sure so that you don't go and get it or come to and submit it and then we're like,
Yeah, I wouldn't want it bigger than that.
yeah,
But talking doesn't cost any money, so rather than go and pay for something to be built and find out later there's a problem,
yeah, reach out and we can
Yeah,
talk at that.
We want,
we want you to succeed in
Yeah,
your
we want-
business.
people to, we want you to know exactly what it is that you need to do, what you can do, and that's why we have this process. So I guess it depends, where we go from here depends on kind of the route that you decide. Whether or not you want, to keep the circular sign you have, and instead of the vinyl, if you want to have it painted on and hang it outside, whether you have it, painted directly on the glass, that would,
Well, I mean, maybe because you're envisaging options and maybe also because we do have a clock when an application is submitted, what we can do is perhaps if you agree, we can table the application with the applicant's approval, which means it stops the clock. You and I can, get in touch, communicate, figure out the next steps forward, so that when it comes back to HAC, it's either sort of, what we want to do. I can, and then we can come and say, okay, this is what's being done. This is what the proposal is, and we can approve it at the next HAC meeting. And then we don't have these two kind of things hanging. Okay.
That sounds good.
Are you okay with that?
Yes, my next question is, do you need to fill out a new application?
No.
Every time, like, if I wanted to put like a flower pot outside, like something like that, that's not, it doesn't live
No.
there forever, but it's decorative.
Well,
and
well,
not-
let's be very careful.
Mhm.
We have another business on that street with a very contemporary flower pot design, which would not be acceptable. So one of the things that we're working on, and sorry that we don't have it right here today, but this is all new for us too.
Okay.
You could put a flower pot out there, but it can't be plastic.
Oh, no.
And thank you so much. There are so many out there right now, I wanna kill myself. But it also should have, pay some homage to the historic area. And, you know, we've put together some images around what would be okay. They have, I think it all has to get approved by the city council, so, you know, I can't, but you've got a brain and you know what historic stuff kind of looks like, so, you know, no problem with that. But just be mindful, there's a lot of non-compliant furniture right now that is like chairs and tables sitting on Delaware Street, which don't belong there because they're not the right period for the building.
It's better to ask than be disappointed later on. So if we table this, it stands still right now, nothing happens. You can have free conversations until understandings are reached and you're comfortable as a business owner.
And to clarify, when we say it stops the clock, it's, the code was written so that when an application is submitted, basically a timer starts. And we have to take action within 60 days. So if we table an application with the applicant's consent, that stops the clock. So then we're not kind of racing against that 60-day time period. So we have to make some sort of determination, but now this allows you to talk to Layla and figure out, you know, what the next step is, you know.
Okay.
And since we're not reviewing your request for the planter, but just to give you some reference, the guidelines are online. If you just go to the city webpage and look for the Historic Area Commission's page, you can link to the guidelines and standards. And there is a section for street furniture on page 121. And it says, modern trash containers, newspaper boxes, and planters in design and materials compatible with the historic character are appropriate. So you just have to think about, you know, the era of your building and what would look appropriate. It can't be, you know, super modern or funky looking, you know, something that would be more historically appropriate. But those are, since that's not your application in front of us today, we won't go into super detail, but, you know, that is part of the guidelines. And, you know, if you have any further questions, I'm sure Layla would not mind when she's discussing the sign with you as well.
Do we need a motion and resolution to table this, or can you just decide as the chair?
No,
No,
we definitely need a motion, but
I think you had one more question.
Yeah, my question with that was just that I needed to do an application before I did anything with the flower stuff. Because I don't want a situation like this where I put something out that I think would be approved and then it not, like if I need to do this again.
And that's something, I will say, that's something that we are working on. And you brought up, you know, we are well aware that there are other businesses that are not in compliance. And these are ongoing discussions that we have had with the city administrator, because you're absolutely right. It's not fair that other people are allowed to have things that, you know, it's, unfortunately, that's not something that we have control over. I think there definitely needs to be a better mechanism so that when people do come into the city, especially if you're renting, you know, it does need to be communicated that, hey, if you know, for signage, you know, there's a process because it's a historic district and we are doing everything within our power to improve that process. It's frustrating because we're limited as to what we can do. We can't put anything out without the approval of council, and ultimately it is council and the city administration that oversees kind of the distribution of that kind of information.
Well, and to be fair, they haven't had a code enforcer there's 2 positions in the city and they haven't been filled for a year. So we've just got a new person now. I hope that you see clean up on these matters on Delaware Street. We're certainly applying a lot of pressure on that, so.
However, I'm not clear that we've given
No.
her an answer about, is an application needed, yes or no? Is it recommended, yes or no?
Recommended.
It's rec-
We recommend it. We don't have to take a vote on that.
And, you know, it's the kind of thing you can submit and you have the sizes of the pots and they're clearly compliant. That can be reviewed as a tier 1, which means have
Yeah,
to come
That's a
to
good
HAC.
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Marika gets it, she sends it to me, I look at it and I do it administratively, you can go ahead.
Alright.
And if you have any doubts, just ping me. And by the way, if I don't answer, I don't mind people texting me. Just let me know who you are, because sometimes people text and I'm like,
It's
um,
just a number.
yes, so, and then I'll make sure to either, you know, look at something or give you guidance, that's not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there, before we make a motion, I have to ask, are there any public comments related to this agenda? Or to this
Nice
agenda
design.
item?
It is actually the north face of Mount McKinley, which is in Denali National Park.
Hmm.
It's where I'm from, Alaska.
that's nice.
You're a long way from home.
You've had good reviews on the place so far, I just want you to know.
We're glad you're in the town.
Yeah.
We're glad you have a business. We want you to understand the goals and ambitions of this commission. And we try to be as reasonable as we can to help someone navigate things that are, in fact, they're confusing to some of us. Okay, so
All right, do we need a motion to table this?
To table it with the applicant's consent.
Okay, I'll make a motion to table this with the applicant's consent.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. And thank you for doing it. Okay, so with that, we can move on to our second application, which is 206 Delaware Street. Mr. Foster, if you'd like, you can stay where you're seated. I think where you're welcome. Yeah, I think as we're looking at, you know, drawings and things, it's easier if you're a little closer. So I guess we'll start out if you want to tell us about your project.
Yeah, so, I don't know if you all have the plans. You all have it? So, yeah, so the Mercury's been around for, 3.5-ish years. And we're doing great and we're growing slowly. And I saw an opportunity with the garage space that we had in the back. We had previously really never used it. It wasn't licensed to be used, at least from the liquor board. And we had a clothing shop in there, did a pop-up and ended up staying for over a year. And then when we found her a better place across the street on Delaware Street in the old town hall, I had that space vacant for a while. But in my head, I really wanted a larger room to be able to have small events, because we don't have that space in the Mercury. And coupled with that, I also don't really have a kitchen in the Mercury, as Tara knows.
Yeah,
I
I think anyone who's been in there knows that, yeah.
It's very small space, where we do prepare drinks, we also cook the food. And on days that we're closed, which is Monday and Tuesday, we also prep in that space. It's where I make my soup and I do everything there. So it's sort of the heart of the place, but if we were ever to be able to consider growth, I need to move that kitchen space somewhere else. And so with that, I got an idea with my friend Nick here, helping me out, to add on to the garage space and add plumbing, add a bathroom, which we also desperately need, because we only have one. All the while being ADA compliant, and to be able to use that space to prep, to cook, and do those things while we're open. So potentially allowing the Mercury to be open 7 days a week. And also to be able to meet the needs of other businesses that have been asking me to provide food services. One being the Sycamore. They have food that's being prepared for them since they don't have a kitchen or a Board of Health permit prepared offsite and given to them, which they then serve to their guests. So I've spoken to Tricia and Anthony, the owners, and they both expressed a great interest in having me prepare those pre-prepared food items, and I would do so in this space and then be able to sell. I also talked to CJ Seitz, one of the Supreme Court justices here who lives in town, and he also said that he's expressed interest from one of his judges downtown in Bloomington to do catering events, and they specifically want us to do it. And I was like, CJ, I can't do that. I don't have the space to do that, but I did see him the other day, and I said, you know what, we may have that space by the end of the summer. We'll see how things go. So it does open up a lot of doors for us as far as a business. But again, this is a process that needs to be done the right way. So I'm going through the correct channels to be able to do that. And hopefully with your guidance, being able to move forward in this project. Taking the old garage, which essentially is an old cinder block building, and giving it a new life and making it look better than an old metal garage door facing the alley. So we'll see how it goes. And that's kind of the overview of the reason behind what we're.
I just wanted to say, before you give your comments, Layla, thank you for, like, when you revised the application, like, this is great. It has all the information we were looking for, so we really appreciate that because that's one of the things that tends to hold up the review process, and we want to give people answers as soon as we can. So this is a really great application, and we really appreciate the thoroughness and thoughtfulness that you put into this.
From the perspective of the review, yeah, thank you for having provided all the additional information. It is in the back, it's secondary, not as visible from the public right of way, so the principle of removing the shed roof, rear addition and putting in the new addition, coming in with hardy plank, mimicking all that, that's greatly appreciated. I do believe the wood door doesn't specify, but it's a wood door, correct? The rest of it. And the wood windows with the applied lights, I think that's all fine from a materials perspective, and I'm pretty sure you're gonna be putting, had a hard time reading in the scans, but you're gonna be putting architectural shingle of some type or another, right?
Yes, we'll match existing.
Yeah. So I think from the perspective of the scale of the materials and all of that, I think this definitely meets the guidelines, and I would be comfortable suggesting an approval. I do have one question, and I really tried to stay in my lane, which is subject matter expert for the Historic Area Commission and not architect, reviewing the layout. But there's one thing that could potentially impact the layout of the kitchen. This is very tight, and that kitchen is very tight. Has this layout been approved by the Board of Health?
No, I haven't gone to the Board of Health or the Liquor Board because I wanted to do this first, because if it wasn't gonna happen, then.
So what I would say, the only thing that would have an impact is because it's very narrow and you have some proximity of like the triple sink, and I don't know if that's an other sink, a deep sink on the side, or if it's a dry. You have the Board of Health, and you've probably seen, having designed kitchens with them. They have a lot of stipulations in terms of clearances and distances and proximities and non-proximities. And because they're gonna be doing not just like the service, but also potential food prep for catering, so they're also gonna have requirements about storage. I'm pointing that out now because it means that this addition might need to be deeper for you to have the proper clearances. So you might need to have to move it further towards the back. And the question I have is, I'm more than comfortable saying this is something that could be approved for the materials and the concept. I would caution to say perhaps it's smarter to use this as a consultation, that we can note for the record that the materials, the scale, the impact, but I would not recommend approving a plan that has not been vetted, because I don't want you to have to come back, because if you do through that process and they say, well, we need an extra 2 feet. Because you don't have the clearances, then you'd have to come back and put a new application in. So that that would be approved, because one of the things that HAC reviews is setbacks and dimensions. So that's the only thing, since you haven't, it might be a smarter decision to take this as a consultation, address it as a consultation, show the approval or whatever the final decision of the commission is on the principle, on the scale, on the materials, on the proposed work. And then wait until you have a final determination what your actual layout is. And then that would come back and could be a final application that could then be reviewed and approved by HAC. Because I don't, at this point, I would not, because there has not been an approval on something that's a key. So that's, I'm only saying that's the part where the architect and the Historic Area Review Commission comes. I look at this and I'm pretty sure they might be requiring a deeper space. So at that point, I would be cautious about approving a plan that is probably going to be changed, and that would impact the overall exterior envelope, which is what we review.
Right, so you're saying regardless of what's going on inside the building, you will be approving based on this
Yes.
current plan?
Yes, this concept works, this concept is well thought out, the materials meet the guidelines, the roofing meets the guidelines. I am just not certain that you have, now I could say it can be approved just as is. And then you'd have an approval, but I would then recommend that the approval say, should there be any change to the footprint, then you have to come back to HAC.
Or treat it as a consultation, and this isn't our official approval until you come back and you're confident that what you're showing as a footprint
Right.
is in fact.
And I don't think
Saves you 50
It's a,
bucks.
it's a
You would have
question,
to pay anything additional.
convenience to you.
Saves you 50 bucks, that's the whole.
Well, it's more of like, I can't move to the next step unless I have the approval from that.
Well, yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah, well, I think practically for you to do this, you need HAC,
Mhm.
you need the other permit, you need the building permit, but you also need, the priority is really needing to make sure that your design meets all the guidelines of the Board of Health and, you know, all of that. So that's a critical component. And I think by the time you have, and that takes time, right, the process. So I think if you go and present, I don't know who's gonna present it, but if you present the plan and say, this is a layout, this is what I wanna do, have it reviewed, have the building code, because that's the thing that kind of Jeff would also do and say it needs not, but you definitely have to have those. And I clearly know that they do have issues with, you know, you'd have to potentially get an exemption because this, with these distances, this kitchen would clearly not be ADA compliant now perhaps it's because of the size, but you are a commercial entity. You're meaning to use it for your adjacent commercial entity. You're meaning to use it to prepare catered goods, which kind of raises a whole different category. I would strongly recommend having those tied. So I think what you can take from today as a consultation is that your design is solid from the perspective of will HAC approve it. Now you need to tighten down the other component, like will the Board of Health be okay with the plan as it stands? Because that's gonna impact your budget, that's gonna impact your plumbing, that's gonna impact, you know, the constructability of the approval that you'll get from Jeff.
Yeah.
And your certificate of occupancy and operation. So I think you can tell yourself today, you've checked the box, like my materials are good, my overall design is good. Now I need to move to the next thing, like, am I good on the floor plan? Will that pass muster? I would say the priority would be the Board of Health because, you know, then you get into constructability. And once you do that, then come back and ascertain, and that can be easily, you know.
That could be a tier one.
Yes, the
Yeah. So
consultation.
you don't have to wait a month.
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
important.
kind of what I was.
That's
It's
really
kind of your
important.
call to
Yeah.
make.
And that's why we like to go through all the
Yeah,
options that are available too. I mean, from a material standpoint, like everything is good. It's all in compliance with the guidelines and standards. So really the only thing that could change would be the size. So if we're comfortable with this plan, even if the size does change, you know,
I would suggest in depth.
yes,
The
in
depth of the addition
exactly.
Well,
So,
and the
And,
scale.
and I mean, I know we can't approve arbitrary numbers, but just going by how much left is to the property line, the expansion would have to be pretty great for it not to meet the setback requirements.
Mhm.
It would have to double in size for us to like not approve it based on
Right.
dimensions.
Well, also, even if that were to happen, you can appeal to the Board of Adjustment. So
Yeah.
there's a recourse.
Like I said, we can't throw out arbitrary numbers,
Right.
but I mean, just to give you a little bit of sense of calm about this is, and I don't think you're planning on doubling
No.
the size of your project.
A
So,
couple feet.
yeah,
maybe,
Yeah.
but-
So that, and then that's a tier one and.
That's
How would you like to proceed?
Well, I don't know. I liked the idea, I mean, the suggestion was good with the consultation. And if all I had to do was to resubmit this with modifications and it would be tier one, then that's what I would like to do,
Yeah,
I believe.
I think, so as far as, I think that's a good option because since I think we're all in agreement that these materials, that are appropriate, depending on what the Board of Health says, if anything has to be modified, you just submit your modified plans. They can be reviewed as a tier one by Layla and they can be approved by her. So you don't have to come back here.
And if for some reason they're not approved, you still have the privilege of coming back and explaining
Yeah,
yourself.
I mean, and what I would recommend is at that point, once you know what it's gonna be, reach out to me informally. We'll talk about it, I'll look at it, and if we're all good, I'll say, okay, now you can officially submit it to Marika. Marika will send it to me so that, then you're in the pipeline and we'll go from there.
One other thing that I would mention, and it's just, again, we're
Yes.
trying to make sure that everything is consistent and, we're giving everyone the same information. For things like, lighting fixtures, signage, if you have any idea of what those would be, because, and there's, I think, some leeway here because it's not it's not visible from the public right of way necessarily, or there's far less visibility. But if have an idea what those are, I would submit those as well. If anything changes, or even if it doesn't, I would submit those for review as well, for the tier one review.
Okay.
To determine,
Yeah, because they're subject to review. The criteria are a little bit looser because you're not visible from the public right of way. But it is, so if you know that you're gonna put 2 lights on either side of the door, if you know you wanna put something, then yes, you need to come back and we can talk about that. And if they meet the criteria, then that is something that I can approve as a tier one.
Is that something that we can add into this
Yes.
application?
Yeah.
Okay,
Cut
And-
sheets, location, type of fixture.
okay.
and I say that too, and I feel like this whole night, I'm like, well, I also just want to add on here. But I think it's important that we're explaining the reasoning behind, because I want people to understand or to leave here with an understanding of what the next steps are and what the process is. When it comes to things like the lighting and signage, like, you might think that it's like, well, what do you want to review those for? But there are instances where, so like with signage, we don't, like, interior illuminated or like illuminated signage isn't appropriate. But there are, for a wood sign, potentially, if you wanted that illuminated, Layla and I have talked about this. There is a way which perhaps you could do that, and it's much easier to review those options with the architect, with the subject matter expert, before you install it, rather than after and finding out, oh, you could have done something much simpler, from the get-go. This whole process exists. We're a resource, so we just want people to understand that. Don't be afraid to reach out to us. Where you proceed. So since this is if we're treating this as a consultation, then there's really no motion or anything that we need to make unless we're recommending it for tier one approval. I don't know if we still need to make a motion then.
No, I don't think it's premature for that. He's gonna come back and have his discussions.
Well, I mean, unless, I mean, you can make a motion saying that you have examined this consultation, that you've approved the material, the scale, that, you know, but there's gonna be additional potentially modifications to the depth of the addition, and, you know, that can be submitted, and should the application at that point meet all of be similar to all the materials and scales and that I've approved here, then that can be reviewed and approved as a tier one. That's what you've done.
I think that would give you a little bit more comfort if
Yeah.
we did that.
Yes,
Yeah.
we would.
Okay. Cause my tummy approves your plan, I'm just telling you.
Would someone like,
That's not supposed to have any bearing on our decisions here.
are there any related to this?
Yeah, just had a couple. Would the space be used where the public would have access to it? Or is it just as a commissary?
You can't see the plans, but the garage space that will be the event space. So whether it's up to me to use it however I see fit, whether it's events or open all the time based on staffing, so.
Yeah, but I mean, the basic premise is that it would be used as commissary and public access in whatever fashion it is. So it's not just for you guys.
It's a private business, it's my business.
I get that. I got that.
Okay.
But as far as it will be multi-use for you and or customers or clients.
It'll be accessible to patrons.
Yeah, it's a restaurant.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a restaurant.
It's not a public park.
It's an addition to a restaurant.
But whether or not you have it open all the time is at your discretion.
Yeah.
Right. Yes.
Second, would if the footprint or usage or something is different from its current, would it have to go before planning?
That's,
Yeah,
that's a different consideration. If there's a change of use to the current use, that would be a code review and a determination. That would impact also the guidelines and the codes that you would be, you know, because you're going from a garage to
Yeah, I
a
just brought
restaurant.
it
So
up
that
for-
will be reviewed as part of the building permit review.
They did use that as an event space, the previous restaurant as
I
well.
just,
The only things you can't confirm whether that was an off the book use or whether it was recognized. And since this is new construction, you're gonna have to, and that's the stuff that both Jeff and the code official and the Board of Health, they want all that information.
And we'll be getting city permit as
Yes,
well. So
that's- that'll be
that
Jeff,
will have to
yeah.
go through everything, the proper channels in that respect.
sounds exciting. Thank you.
Fingers crossed.
Um, like.
So it was a big mouthful. Can Leila say it again and I'll say it's my motion? Can we do that, Kathy?
Yeah, so the motion would be approving,
Concept.
the concept as presented in terms of materials,
Scale.
and scale. And as a consultation, and if anything changes relating to, or there are any modifications relating to the depth of the building, as long as everything is consistent with what has been presented today, we can recommend that for tier one approval, so it doesn't have to come back to us.
My motion.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion approved. Congratulations.
Very exciting.
And you have my contact info.
So. Planning commission update.
There's no update. There's been no meeting.
That's right, I guess not since.
Yeah.
And then pertaining to the item of signage, the document that we approved last time. I submitted the updated document, the edits that we suggested that Cynthia made. So that is with the city administrator right now. She is reviewing it and will get back to us with if she has any suggestions.
Okay.
If we get the thumbs up, then it can move forward to council for approval as it's.
What's the timeline on that? Cause you know, we have a crying need here. to get this
I
stuff out.
realize that.
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for you on that, but I will,
Okay.
it's something that I followed up on today, and I don't have an answer tomorrow. I will
Go
continue
bother
to
again.
rattle cages.
I just wanted to also say in this context that I wrote introductory documents for new homeowners, for renters, for new businesses, for real estate agents, and for real estate lawyers in dealing with the historic area as our law as it stands today. I can reformat all that in the same format as we've done it for the signage. So what I've been trying to do is make it so that they're all consistent. If it were to occur that I actually won the election on Saturday, which it could, then I will no longer be on this commission, but I pledge to you that I will help finish that project. So I think it's critical for the city.
Agreed.
So I will not bail on you.
Are you
Yeah.
prohibited from being on the commission? or-
Yeah, you can't be on a commission and serve on the city council at the same time. So I'll miss all of you, but, you know, maybe I'll win, we'll see.
Well, I think that these were two really good applications
Mhm.
that we had today. And honestly, as far as signage is concerned, we just really haven't had the opportunity to review many of them. And so, it's nice to be able to have these
And-
conversations.
And I think a case study is really something we should consider so that people can see that it's not arbitrary and see how the decisions got made. I would be happy to take a shot at writing that. I think you all agree that would be helpful.
Yeah, and I think one of the references that's also helpful is that, you know, in the purview, in the guidelines, where we really state, and we do say the Historic Area Commission, to your point, Lisa, does not review interior work unless it impacts the exterior appearance of the building.
I was looking for I found that at the beginning, but we had moved on. And I think from conversations that I've had or when people have asked me questions, I keep saying this, I know it's a broken record, but everyone has left now, but sometimes I'm approached, and I'm sure you all are as well, and people want to, they want to ask us questions, they're looking for guidance. And I would just caution everyone to be careful because we can give general guidance, I think, in terms of like, you can find more information on this. We can tell people where they can find the guidelines and standards, but we can't consult with them on an application outside of the meeting. And it can be difficult to stay within those confines when people are asking questions. And I know that it can appear as though we're avoiding the question, but in ways we are, because we can't have those
Actually,
You're
discussions.
being mindful of
We're
conflict.
being mindful of conflict.
I do think though that, and I've read this in the materials, I don't have it all in front of me, but I could go look, that we are a resource to the community if they have questions about how things work or what they should do. And I know I've spoken to a number of people who brought their plans before the commission. And because they spoke to me, they could actually have an effective review as opposed to come back 6 times because it's a cipher.
I think in terms of, if someone's saying, I want to do this, you can say, well, you need to submit it to the Historic Area Commission, make sure you have pictures, make sure you
Yeah,
have,
I've done stuff
specs
like
and
that,
things.
yeah.
And I've mentioned, there's very detailed instructions on, the type of pictures you should have, the location, have pictures from the streetscape. If your application is to replace something, you need to show sufficient information that it is damaged beyond repair. You
Yeah.
have to support that. So there's all of that is here. And I think we really need, yes, of course, we can answer those questions, but I think we need to be directing people to the guidelines and standards so that
It doesn't seem arbitrary.
Exactly, and they can look through them and then they can form questions and go to the office and, go through Layla if they still have them,
They come
or,
here more accepting of the whole
Or the
discussion.
building
They're not hearing
official,
anything for the
um,
first time because the automatic reaction is quite reasonable.
yeah,
Someone 2 doors up has it different.
Yeah,
yeah.
that's not a good
So
situation.
the more they prep themselves coming in, Right.
I think we should really be, that's what I'm saying, we should be helping people to finding these, it shouldn't all be going through us. So that's, I think I lost the
Okay.
plot with what I was saying initially, but,
no, you didn't.
anyway,
No,
good.
no, no. We need to have a little public outreach. Maybe we can use,
Yes.
a weekly paper here. Just once every 3 months to say, we're the commission, this is we're not here to badger you or to be traffic cops. Okay, we're here to help you live in the community you plan to live in.
So that is
And we'll
something
give
that
you simple guides about how to approach us.
I spoke to the city administrator about that. We had a meeting, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago at this point. About putting some things in the town crier that go out with the
The MSC.
MSC bill. I think in May, there's going to be an information session, I think with the DDD. So PAC will be a part of that. Layla and I will be there giving a presentation. So there is more outreach planned, and we discussed doing something on an annual basis. And I would still like to see a letter go out to everyone who lives, an annual letter to everyone who lives, if you live in a property that's on the National Register, if you live or have a business in the historic commercial district or you live in the historic residential district, I think that's something that's really necessary. So
Who sends out the real estate tax bill? We can piggyback on that mailing.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Anyway, so those are just a couple things that are in the works that we're discussing. Okay.
Good.
I think we all agree that's needed, and trying to make it a reality.
Standard time.
It's an old city, things don't change overnight.
No, they don't. It's
Just
little
move in
by
a certain
little.
direction, you'll eventually get there.
With that, are there any additional?
Any public
comments?
comments?
Yeah, pertain more towards the signage and their questions.
We're only allowed comments on agenda items.
Signage in historic district, new business agenda. Just saying. Thank you. So my biggest thing is consistency, and you guys kind of addressed it, but in your drawing up what should be and what should not be, there's a particular business that has banners, flags, 24/7. All that stuff should be in, same with sandwich boards. It's out of control. And I know you're not the code enforcement, but those things have to be addressed. I honestly feel there should be, whatever you guys decide, small tables and chairs, because looking at old pictures, people did get something from a business and sit outside. Of course, it would be up to the business, but I think that should be considered as well.
Can I recommend that you make a formal complaint to the city about what appears to be code violations on businesses?
I am every day.
Thank you. That's good.
Um,
We need everyone to do that.
Yeah, you're correct. Another thing is I really appreciate the fact that you put that link in the meeting to see what you guys are seeing. Made a huge difference. So if it was done just this one time, it'd be great if you continue.
So the city didn't mean to cut you off, but I wanted to let you know, the city administrator is doing that, and I believe she's uploading the packets for every meeting, so
that's great.
it is nice, yeah, you can see the packet that council has before them, and so, yeah, I think that's
Excellent.
available across the board now, maybe, I'm not sure, but
All right, well, I'll thank her too,
But I'm
but thank you,
glad that-
thank her, thank everybody. So, as the last thing is, the thing you're putting together, Miss Patty, with the different categories. Would you put like each category on the site or for reference? Or would
Oh,
it
yeah.
just be a general guide
Oh, no, it'd be something people could download, yeah,
for?
and would also be provided in print to people as well. Yeah,
Nice.
the idea is to provide knowledge to people, nobody knows what to do. And we're trying to address that, so.
Yeah, greatly appreciated. All right.
I just want to make a statement, or sort of in response to your comment about tables and chairs. So yes, when you look at historic photos of the town, you saw, merchants had their wares and different things outside in front of the shop. Those, first off, those typically went inside at the end of the day because they might grow legs. But the second thing is that we didn't have ADA back then. And so that's something that it's not just about, and that's also not necessarily, that's something that's kind of outside of our purview, but I think it's worth mentioning, because it is something that's brought up. It's like, well, hey, back in the day, like, look at this picture. They had, there were horses and there were chickens running around, and again, it's why we now have zoning laws.
Yeah.
But also, it's not just about the aesthetic, it's also about making sure that people that they can, traverse the sidewalk as safely as they can.
And I did just clarify that. One business encroaches too far into closing that area, where at the corner of, across from the courthouse, the Mexican place in the coffee shop, whatever it is. I did measure, and that does, from the measurements that ADA requires of sidewalks, that does pass the muster on that.
I mean, but it could also be different once you have people sitting in chairs, and it's just,
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
people
that's
move
not good.
chairs and people move tables and they want to
Yeah.
make their own little group together. and
Well, there's
it's
a
little
specific-
fluid.
Yeah, and there's specific requirements if you're providing exterior seating for, restaurant establishments. And normally, I know what the detail is in the code, but, and also from the building code and from all sorts of perspectives of that aspect. I think where hack might be coming is if somebody has an approved area of seating and they start leaving seating out there that becomes quasi-permanent because it's not taken in everything, then it should be appropriate and meet the standards and be reviewed as street furniture because it's staying in place.
And there's almost no street furniture at the moment on Delaware Street that meets the standard, I
Yeah.
would just say.
And the weird thing is, a couple of them have been bolted down. I don't know if anybody knows that,
Then they definitely should be viewed as furniture and they should be
yeah.
subject to application.
we hear you, and we wish that we ourselves could do more,
'Cause
but
it's all about all the groups trying to make it visitor friendly. That's the keywords that keep coming up lately.
well, we're fortunate that so many of our businesses have patios and
Mhm.
nice seating accommodations.
Yeah.
In the back.
Well, thank you for all
Approved
your.
garages.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
and-
that's why I was trying
and
to clarify
consider
that,
garages.
whether it was gonna be mixed use or just for like a commissary for their business. Cause yeah, you're right, with that keeps things out of the public way.
Okay, it's dinner time,
Yeah.
people.
On that note, if there are no further comments or concerns,
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second the motion.
all in favor?
No.
Aye.
Motion approved.
All right.
This is what you call a good session.
That's a very nice shirt.
I like this shirt.